Maybe you're just supposed to have fun while trying to fool your grandma. Yeah, except grandma's like, of course she's games. You could dominate her without cheating, because she's your grandma. Her arthritic fingers can barely grab the controller. It is finally time. It has been a while. It has been a long time. My legs have recovered from the last epic standing up station that is an epic blaze. Today, Danny, Sam, and I, the holy trinity of Blaze Boys, bring you an epic blaze. Ridiculous video games that actually existed. This was actually Danny's idea. Maybe he was inspired by the previously mentioned Pimp Simulator, which was absolutely absurd. But before we get started, let me tell you something. Today's video is brought to you by Beard Blaze. What? You've heard of Beard Blaze before? I bang on about it. It's a range of beard oils that I do that are fantastic for your beard. It keeps it all like beautifully in place. And actually, I'm just thinking I didn't put on any on this one or even brush my beard, so it might look crazy unruly. I was in a mega rush. So, great job, Fact Boy. You're really selling it. But good news. New products, baby. I started Beard Blaze with. He was a fan of the channel, and he wrote to me and was like, Simon, let's do something together. I can make all sorts of stuff in my crazy lab. And so we put together 1, beard wash, that's like a beard shampoo, and 2, beard conditioner, that's like a beard conditioner. What? Does what it says on the tin. I probably can't say that because there's a very famous company in the UK, I don't know if it's international, called Ronsil, and that's absolutely there. I totally stole that from them. But I love it, and that's what our product does. It's all in good humor. Please don't sue me, Ronsil. So basically, look, if you've got a beard, you should be washing it. I don't know about you, but for me, because I don't have hair up top, I'm always just stealing my wife's shampoo and rubbing it in my face, and I'm sure it's not the best thing for it, and then I barely ever use conditioner. And yeah, but once you use this stuff, it makes it soft. It makes it more manageable. It's actually the perfect complement to the beard oil that I sell. But you don't have to have one, you don't have to have the other. You can have both or neither or whatever. It'd be bad if you had neither, because then it's like Simon did a shit job selling the product. But look, it's available now. It's also available in big sizes as well. These are particularly light because they're actually empty. The big size, currently these are just sample ones, so totally empty. But the small ones, those are the ones I've been trying. It's brilliant stuff. Please do check it out, beardblaze.com. Let's get into it. We got a long way to go today, folks. Buckle in. It's funny how most of the things I proudly used to have on display in my bedroom or in my living room have been rendered completely invisible in the modern era. My massive vinyl record collection has now been replaced by Spotify. My huge collection of VHS tapes and DVD box sets has now been superseded by on-demand TV. I'm looking at buying a house at the moment, and I looked at a house the other day, and I was in the living room, and this person had a huge collection of DVDs. And I'm like, did I just step into the early 2000s? Like, what's up? And maybe they were Blu-rays, but I don't know. It's like, who has that anymore? It's like, what's going on? Who are you? Why do you have this? Did you get locked in some sort of time bubble?
Joke's on you, I'm into that shit!
And for many people, but certainly not me, those shelves creaking with beautiful books have been replaced by the Kindle. I have to say, I quite like reading paper books. I had a Kindle, love the Kindle, it's a brilliant piece of technology, but I gradually just went back. I don't know how or why. I think my Kindle ran out of battery one time, and then I started reading a paper book. And then I was just like, I've got so many paper books to read, because you get given them, you buy them when you're in the shop, and you're like, yeah, I'll eventually read all of them. And so I've just kind of recommitted to reading all the paper books that I've bought over the years or been given and haven't read. So, I'm with you on this one, Danny. It seems a shame in a way, as I thought that those physical collections gave us just some insight into your identity. These are the books and films and bands that I like. Please be careful not to trip over them. Yeah, also, it's like, yeah, well, what about the other books? What about the other music? It's like all my Nickelback albums are hidden behind my Pink Floyd ones. And it's like, honestly, I don't know, The Wall is such a piece of shit, but I actually rather listen to Nickelback. And I know everyone's going to hate that. That's just, I guess that's okay. That's okay with me.
Nobody even wants you here.
Nowadays, I have to fill up that empty space with rubbish owl ornaments and exercise bikes. And things. Great descriptive work there, Daddy. What are you filling up your shelf with? Oh, things. Yeah, things. Mine is filled up with empty boxes of Magic Spoon because the boxes look really pretty. So I stack them on the shelf here and it looks really cool.
Okay.
Back when I was a kid, a big chunk of my bedroom was also given over to the hundreds of cassette games I bought for the ZX Spectrum and later the Commodore 64, often in nice, big, fancy boxes, which were admittedly an example of over-excessive packaging to house a single cassette. Still, they looked good. But there was one game which very rarely got put on display alongside the others in a typical schoolboy's bedroom. It was the dirty secret of the 8-bit world. The game that got sneakily passed around behind the school bike sheds that probably never existed. The game that got stashed away under the bed or hidden away in a locked drawer. Guitar Hero Nickelback. Not really. And that game was Samantha Fox's Strip Poker. Oh, shit. Get ready for some pixelated boobies. I remember Duke Nukem. Was it Duke Nukem where there were posters of women with their, with their tits out, as we'd say as kids? And we were all very excited about that. To explain Samantha Fox to anyone outside of the UK, it might first be necessary to explain the curiously British phenomenon of the page 3 girl. I believe I made a video about page 3. It's like, well, Danny's about to explain it, so I'm not going to. But it's kind of gone out of fashion. Because, I don't know why. I feel like we're moving towards more acceptability of nudity and stuff, but as we've become a bit more liberal. But apparently the page 3 girl is also interestingly liberal and not liberal at the same time, because it's it's confusing, isn't it? It's really confusing because it's wait, does pornography exploit people or does it liberate people? Because it's I don't know. It probably is an individual basis, isn't it? I don't know, what am I talking about? Stop having opinions that you don't understand, Whistler, and get on with it. I would imagine that when most people around the world would turn a front cover of a newspaper, they typically expect to find, well, more news. But for several decades in the UK, you'd be just as likely to turn the front cover and find an almost full-page photograph of a topless woman on page 3. I thought it was just The Sun and the Daily Sport, which is basically just pornography. Ever since 1970, best-selling tabloid tats like The Sun and the Daily Star found it necessary to insert full-colour chest dumplings on the third page of the newspapers that would be delivered to your home by young paperboys and girls every morning. I couldn't even really begin to explain why. I can only assume that newspaper editors thought it would liven up the lunchtimes of male workers who could enjoy the daily sight of a pair of barnyard boppers. Danny, how many words do we need to come up with for this? While reading the news over a cheese and pickle sandwich. But cheese and pickle sandwiches is a bit rough. It's it's a British thing. You have bread, a slice of cheese, and then something called Branston pickle, which it's delicious. But I'm not a big fan of cheese and pickle sandwiches. BLT, yes. Oh my god, I was driving somewhere yesterday and I was really late and I hadn't had any lunch, so I stopped into the petrol station. And I don't know what possessed me to buy the tuna fish sandwich. Because, that's the most risky one that you buy from a petrol station or a gas station. And I'm eating it in my car, and I'm driving along, and I'm like, this is rough. And it's kind of soggy, but also stale at the same time. And I'm like, how do you scientifically manage this sandwich company? How do you make it both bad things at the same time, soggy and dry? And then it's 30-something degrees out, so I don't know, 90-something Fahrenheit. And I park my car in I don't know why I do this, for parking the car, because it's been, a good 20 years since I've had a car with a handbrake. But I park my car, and then it's it's really bloody hot outside, and I come back to the car after 3 hours, and the whole car stinks of that sandwich, and I'm like, oh god, what have I done? Bad decision, Whistler. What are we talking about? Oh yes, the things I can riff off, a cheese and pickle sandwich, and boom, 2 minutes out of the journey of the epic blaze. It's going to be long, isn't it? But looking back now, it must have felt a bit weird if you were sitting next to somebody on a bus or a train and they were reading page 3. Were they reading the news sections on that page, or were they just staring at a pair of bacon hangers? It's one of those things, it's I don't watch Game of Thrones, or a show with nudity, any HBO show, like Entourage. You're just watching Entourage on a plane. Or Game of Thrones for other people who like fantasy and, nonsense like that. And you're just watching Game of Thrones on your tablet or whatever, and it's excellent. And then there's a full-on sex scene. And and you're just I'm not watching porn on the plane. I'm not. It's HBO. HBO, why do you do this? HBO needs to release Safe for Planes versions or that kind of stuff. We could just call it Safe for Work, I guess. That'd be sensible. That already exists. Why not just use that? Never being a tabloid reader myself, I always assumed that page 3 girls had been permanently clipped from the newspapers years ago, but I was surprised to learn today that the Daily Star was the last newspaper to start putting clothes on the model, and that happened as recently as 2019. Samantha Fox was one of the most famous page 3 girls of all time, and she later went on to carve out a modest career as a pop singer. I've never heard of her. I still believe she manages to sell a few records in Finland. Okay. So, she was an all-natural choice to front the release of a new strip poker game for the 8-bit machines in 1986. Samantha Fox's Strip Poker was released by Martech for the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, MSX, and even the BBC Micro. I've heard of, one of these. Jesus. And for many gamers, that was the very first experience of surprisingly saucy software. In the one-player version, you take on a fully clothed Samantha Fox in a game of 7-card stud poker. Sam is represented by a black and white digitized photograph. Each time you win a few rounds, the photograph will change to reveal that Sam has removed an item of clothing. But she'll stop putting the clothes back on when you lose a few rounds. The idea is to win enough points to reach the final photograph of the game, in which Sam is topless. How many pieces of clothing is she removing? She's wearing 7 coats. The game was advertised as being probably the most powerful simulation ever written for a home microcomputer. Oh yes, simulation. That's a little bit rich at the core of the code. It's a very basic poker game, the likes of which had already been getting printed as free type-in listings in the pages of computer magazines for years. In the olden days, if you couldn't afford to buy many proper games, you could always just buy a cheap magazine which featured the code for about 20 different basic games for you to type in yourself. Oh my god, that must have taken forever. It always took ages to type in the 10 pages of code for each game, and if you made just one tiny mistake, the game wouldn't work and it would take hours to go back through it all and find the single rogue digit. That is so painful. And the games were also incredibly lame. The problem with any kind of poker simulation is that the cards are always stacked very heavily against the human player. You're not really playing against Sam Fox, you're playing against the computer. And everyone on that computer's a big brain. You can't beat them. Who always know exactly what cards you're holding, which completely eliminates the whole game mechanic of bluffing. As you get again agonizingly close to the final photograph, the computer clearly starts cheating and bids to stretch out the shelf life of the game and keep you coming back for more. Yeah, I mean, once it's Sam Fox gets topless, you're like, alright, cool. Wait, so every time you want to see Sam Fox topless, you got to win many rounds of poker. For f***'s sake. But the biggest problem with Samantha Fox's strip poker is that the old 8-bit machines clearly weren't cut out for digitized photography. The blurry and grainy visuals are more of an eyesore than anything else. The C64 version is probably the best of the bunch, but the poor old Spectrum version is just a depressing mess of distorted monochromatic pixels. And in this case, Sam's pixels really weren't paying the £9 price tag for it. No, because you could pick up a copy of The Sun with her topless on the third page in full color that you don't have to play loads of rounds of poker to get to for, I don't know, it was 20p when I was a kid. It's basically free. I'm sure it's more expensive nowadays because of inflation and stuff, disappointingly. Inflation's the worst. Strip poker games became a bit more effective in the 90s with the arrival of machines like the Amiga and the Atari ST, which were capable of depicting pictures that you could actually identify. In many ways, perhaps Sam Fox's game was a bit too far ahead of its time, and the idea of trying to create an erotic game in rubbish black and white pixels in 1986 was bordering on the ridiculous. Then again, maybe most video games are usually based on utterly ludicrous concepts anyway. You don't tend to see much realism or logic in titles like Pac-Man, Frogger, Sonic the Hedgehog, or Ninja Bread Man. Is Ninja Bread Man really a thing? I can't believe that's a real thing. Although Sonic the Hedgehog, you'd also be like, that ridiculous, no one wants to play a game with a hedgehog. And yet it's enormously popular and super weird.
Joke's on you, I'm into that shit!
But some video games are most... I never really got into Sonic. I know they made a movie about it recently, which looked a bit and I think then they redid the CGI because everyone made fun of it, right? That must have been expensive. But some video games are definitely more ridiculous than others, and there's a long list of titles which should never have been allowed to escape from the twisted and warped minds of the coders. And with that, today's introduction, I believe, is over. So let us get into the video. Custer's Revenge. The Wild Wild West is a natural setting for a fast-shooting video game, and it's no surprise that the first ever arcade game to use something as advanced as a microprocessor was the classic two-player shootout gunfight from 1975, a few years before even the mighty Space Invaders had descended. A video game in 1975 with 2 players? Amazing. Oh, I mean, hang on, in my mind they're using like light guns, but it's just going to be like on the screen, isn't it? Yeah, okay, it's not that amazing. Is it? I don't really know. Anything before like the 1990s, I'm very confused about. It's all just, to me, it's just the past. And then I'm like, okay, great, stuff happened.
Okay, Boomer.
On first glance, Custer's Revenge looks like it might be a typical Western game released for the Atari 2600, or however you want to say it. I'm sure there's a correct way, which I'm not going to look up. In 1982 by Mystique, the game seems like an early primitive attempt to bring the thrills and spills of the wild frontier into your living room for the first time. Admittedly, the choice of hero is a little unusual. General George Custer was a controversial cavalry commander during the American Indian Wars who met a grisly death at the Battle of Little Bighorn. I think I've made a video about him on my channel Biographics, but I remember absolutely nothing about him. I've heard of him. I've heard of the Battle of Little Bighorn, which is oxymoronically named. Weird. But yeah, I mean, the other day I found out that we just published our 500th Biographics episode, and I'm like, yeah, no wonder I don't remember any of them. Hailed as a hero at the time, he's now considered in some quarters to be a bloodthirsty Indian killer. In many ways, General Custer could be considered an early victim of cancel culture. Yeah, also, like, victim of cancel culture. Also, he killed a lot of the native population, it seems. So, I mean, victim of cancel culture? Is Harvey Weinstein a victim of cancel culture? No. He deserved to get cancelled and go to prison because he was a rapist. And I don't even have to say allegedly anymore. He went to prison for rape, right? If he didn't go to prison for rape, allegedly. Pretty sure he did. Pretty sure he's a rapist. But I'm not here to judge whether he was a hero or villain. Okay, Danny, you're not. I am. I just want to see how he returns from beyond the grave and exacts his revenge on the Indians that killed him. Booting up the game today, I see the usual simplistic desert landscape sprinkled with cacti, portrayed in a very primitive and blocky Atari graphics. The character of Custer appears on the left-hand side of the screen, and the Native American woman is tied to a pole on the right-hand side of the screen. Where is this going? The object of the game appears to be to maneuver Custer to the other side of the screen, avoiding the hail of deadly arrows that fall from the sky. Perhaps he's had a change of heart and intends to rescue the Native American woman prisoner. But then I notice a few odd things about the game. For starters, apart from the fetching blue cowboy hat and pair of boots, General Custer is naked and clearly has a massive boner. The Native American woman is also naked. Dude. What? When I said, I wonder where this is going, I was being sarcastic. Like, it's not about that, is it? Is it? Oh my God. Oh my God, what is going on? This is not good. This is When you make it past the falling arrows and reach the prisoner, you press the fire button to see what happens next, but it looks like the rescue attempt is off. Pressing the fire button just makes Custer stick his wang inside the prisoner. The idea is to keep pressing the button repeatedly to rack up as many points as you can before an arrow inevitably hits you on the head and you're forced back to square one. Yes, the object of Custer's revenge is to rape a Native American woman. What the is going on? Who made this game? Mystique. Are you insane? Are you actually insane? The only explanation for this has to be insanity. I mean, it's just, I feel like the explanation could be racism, but that just doesn't feel like enough. It's like insane racism. F***ing hell. Of course, they don't use the word rape in the marketing material or instructions, but the message is still very clear. The text on the box reads that your danders up and your pistols waving. You set your sights on a ravishing maiden named Revenge, but she's not about to take it lying down by George. Whoever came up with that, you need to be investigated because there's something wrong with you, and you need to have an eye kept on you by the police. And maybe you could get on some sort of register. Mystique was actually a subsidiary of an adult movie company and had produced a few erotic titles in the past. That company needs to be looked into as well. But nothing as racy, as racist and rapey was generally quite appealing, as appalling as this Wild West. show. And it's not like it was an under-the-counter or black market title. This game was proudly displayed on the racks of your local computer game store alongside Pac-Man and E.T. A sticker on the front of the box screamed out "not for sale to minors," but the instructions acknowledged that it might be difficult to hide the game from innocent eyes. They helpfully advised, if the kids catch you, you should... if the kids catch and you should...
Continue?
If the kids catch you and should ask, tell them Custer and the maiden are just dancing. I don't even know what to say anymore. One Mystique executive explained at the time, "I just don't believe that adults want to shoot down rocket ships." I don't even know what to say. You psycho. But I'm pretty sure that adults wouldn't find much fun in this either. Even if you can somehow bring yourself to disregard the shameful theme and focus on the gameplay, you'll quickly find that there isn't any. At all. There is literally nothing to do except dodge the arrows and keep raping the prisoner to try and get the highest possible score before your lives run out. Even back in 1982, the game would have been repetitive and boring after about 90 seconds, and quite amazingly, Mystique was charging $50 for this, or around $135 in today's money. Even more amazingly, the game sold 80,000 copies. We need to start tracking those people who bought it as well. Get them on that tracking list. Although this was considered to be a massive flop during the initial video game boom, the designer of the game, Joel Miller, claimed at the time that the game was perfectly acceptable, as General Custer was clearly seducing the fine maiden, who was herself a willing participant. Yet, mate, she's tied up. What? But nobody was buying that, and the game was rightfully slammed across the board as a horribly offensive piece of crap which used rape as a gameplay mechanic. And that was in 1982. We were less woke in 1982, and even just the absurdity of it today is amazing. Atari distanced themselves from the game, and when they announced a lawsuit against Mystique for damaging the image of their brand, although that didn't seem to go anywhere. And although several US cities proposed banning the game completely, only Oklahoma actually went ahead with passing a measure which made sales of the game illegal within the limits of the city. Good for you, Oklahoma. Just 1 year later, Mystique had collapsed under the strain of the 1983 North American video game crash. Good, and the game was withdrawn from circulation. Excellent! But it did later enjoy a new lease on life when a tweaked version of the game called General Retreat was released by Playaround. In their version of the game, the roles are reversed, and you play the part of a Native American woman desperate to get to the other side of the screen and have sex with the general prisoner. Nice try, but I don't think that's quite gonna Custer the mustard, or erase the memory of one of the most truly contemptible episodes in the entire history of video games. God damn, guys, that entry was dark, Danny. Is that where we're starting things off? Rape? Shit. Chiller. There was always going to be a few raised eyebrows when people started strapping light guns onto the fronts of arcade cabinets. It's maybe not so bad when you're meant to just be shooting down clay pigeons or alien monsters. I love light guns. It's such a, Time Crisis 2, there was a big Time Crisis 2 machine where I went to university and we would play the shit out of that game. I absolutely loved it. But as graphics capabilities of the machines really began to elevate to the next level in the mid-1980s, young kids were eagerly shoving their 10-pence pieces into the slots to have a go at shooting realistically rendered soldiers right in their faces. I don't think there was anything like a realistically rendered soldier in the 1980s. I play VR games now where you're shooting people and I'm like, it's still not that realistic, is it? It's not really. One of the most disturbing examples of a light gun game was released by Exidy in 1986 under the name Chiller. Now, the weird thing is that I've played Chiller hundreds of times in arcade emulators, and I've thoroughly enjoyed laughing at the comical retro absurdity of the game without giving that much thought as to how it must have gone down when it was first released, because Chiller is not just spooky or grim, it's bordering on sadistic torture porn. Danny, did you just say you've played it hundreds of times and thoroughly enjoyed laughing at it? Danny loves his torture porn. Oh my god, there's a picture of it here, which Sam... I mean, obviously it looks a bit ridiculous today, but I mean, that is still very grim, isn't it? After you grip the light gun tightly in your hand, you're presented with the first screen depicting a messy torture chamber. You can move the crosshair around the screen to start shooting at the helpless semi-naked man and woman chained to the wall, or take a few pot shots at the guy with his head trapped under a vice. Holy shit, this is up, right? There are various mutilated body parts scattered over the floor as the occasional bat flies in to feast on the flesh. Do bats eat flesh? But most of the victims in the game are still clearly alive as they let out a surprisingly authentic shriek of horror when you start blasting at their bodies, exposing their bones and splattering blood all over the walls and floor of this chamber of misery. Danny, did we have to... We had to start off this epic blaze with Entry 1. Let's talk about raping Native Americans. Entry 2. Let's talk about torture. Brilliant. Brilliant work, Danny. So dark. Episode 3 is going to be about simulating your role as an international sex slave smuggler. So great. Thanks, Danny. Just gonna go cry at the state of humanity. The idea is to kill the innocent victims as quickly as possible before your timer runs out, but just shooting at them isn't enough, as the pests take far too long to die. Instead, you need to look around the room and make use of the torture devices at your disposal. For example, shooting the handle of the head vice will cause it to spin around and crush the guy's head relatively quickly. Shooting the handle of the guillotine will eventually cause the blade to drop and slice the head clean off the guy who was just chilling out at the bottom. And in the second screen, the rack room, shooting the edges of the torture racks, which have been thoughtfully positioned beside a river of gushing blood, will quickly pull apart the victims lying on the racks into 2 pieces. On the same screen, shooting a rope pulley will lower a woman hanging from a rope into the jaws of a crocodile who occasionally pops his head up from that river of blood just to say hello, and also eat whatever, has been dangled in front of him. This is super up. In short, the first 2 screens are a gory bloodbath of random appendages, deafening screams, and grisly long-winded death. Danny, I hope you're not going to say, and then it gets much worse, because this is already super up. The game suddenly changes pace for the next few levels, and you find yourself shooting mysterious creatures such as zombies and ghosts in graveyards and haunted hallways. Wait, did this suddenly become a very different and largely more acceptable game? That obviously seems a lot more acceptable, same page. But there's no explanation for the transition and no background story on why exactly you were torturing defenseless people in the first couple of screens, and now you've moved on to shooting ghosts. And this really is the big problem with Chiller. Playing it with modern eyes, it's hard to take the dated graphics and gameplay too seriously, and some might argue that it's not a million miles away from the classic 1987 military-themed light gun arcade shooter, Operation Wolf, in which your mission is to rescue hostages by shooting enemy soldiers close up and blowing their tanks and helicopters to bits. Wait, it's not that different? It's not a million miles away? Well, one is about rescuing, and the other is about just torturing innocent people with racks. It seems very different. At least the message is very different. But in a game like that, you're engaged with an enemy who's fighting back. Yes, the weird thing about Chiller is that you're torturing and killing presumably innocent victims who have been rendered immobile and have no way of defending themselves. Yes, wildly different. The only response you'll ever get from them is another wail of despair as you shoot another limb off their body. One of the game's designers, Vic Ptolemy, revealed decades later that Exidy had given him a brief to create a purposefully horrific game that was likely to generate controversy and press headlines. He admits that he became desensitized to the carnage while immersed in the design of the game, and only realized later with much regret that he had been involved in the creation of a truly repulsive piece of work. But instead of generating global controversy, Chiller just largely slipped under the radar. It's widely reported that the game was outright banned in the UK, but I can't find any evidence of such a ban. It's more likely that the UK arcade owners followed the example set by the arcades in North America and just decided that they didn't want to buy the game at all. Good, because it's super weird. Exidy was instead forced to market it to third world countries where apparently Chiller performed pretty well. Ah yes, well we can't sell it in these countries, we'll sell it in countries which haven't yet got regulation together. Great. Brilliant. Oh dear. But it missed out on generating the outrage and fury that Exidy was hoping to attract in the rest of the world because the self-policing arcade owners ensured that barely anybody got to see it in the first place. On a side note, an unofficial SNES conversion of Chiller was released 4 years later in 1990, which attempted to dilute the senseless slaughter and provide an answer to what exactly the player's meant to be doing by explaining in the instruction manual that all the victims are actually evil spirits who deserve everything they get. It's like, yeah, they're evil spirit. Okay. I mean, it does tie in with the ghosts that apparently later make an appearance. That should hopefully make the player feel just a bit more comfortable when they're crushing those human skulls to a bloody pulp. If you're playing this game, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Don't buy this. But do buy today's fantastic self-sponsor, Beard Blaze shampoos and conditioners. Yes. What? Did I just knock my mic? But don't buy this, okay? I suppose there's an argument that reverse psychology works. It definitely works. People use it all the time, and it's remarkable.
Don't you get it? You gotta use reverse psychology. That sounds too complicated. Okay, don't use reverse psychology. All right, I will.
I once mentioned in a previous script that only a complete buffoon would launch a lovely fragrance and then slap a terrible name on the packaging, like, say, Rotting Turtle. But what would I know about such things? And yes, absolutely. Second sponsor for today, you can go to rottingturtle.net and pick up a wonderful smelling bottle of Rotting Turtle that smells, it actually smells awesome. It's like citrusy, it's a really nice smell. I'm smelling it on my own clothes right now because I have a bottle at my desk and every now and again I'm like, it just smells so good. Psst, psst. I spray a little on myself, and I have a good time. Rottingturtle.net. Back in 1985, the UK started the software. Back in 1985, the UK software label Firebird, owned by British Telecom, released a compilation of 5 original games for the ZX Spectrum at a budget price of just £2.50p. And in another example of reverse psychology at work, they decided to call it Don't Buy This and marketed it with the slogan 5 of the worst games ever. The problem is, if they are actually the worst games ever, I guess this is like pre-internet, so you just have to hear from our friends. But like, if I saw this for sale today, I would be like, are the 5 worst games ever actually terrible? Like, if this was on Steam for like $2.49 or whatever, I'd be like, are the worst games ever actually that bad? Into Google, and immediately I'd know whether it's worth buying or not. But back in the day, people, I guess, they just don't know. In those days, budding bedroom programmers would often submit their new games to software labels in the hopes of carving out a career as a professional game designer. I remember reading a book when I was a kid, and it was the coolest thing ever. It was called like Matt's Millions. I don't know if anyone else read this, but I got this book from somewhere, and it was about this 11-year-old kid or whatever, and he made a computer game, and he sold it for like 1-point-something million pounds. And I'm just like, holy shit, that would be awesome.
Hot diggity da!
And then I did nothing like that and just continued playing video games like every normal 11-year-old ever. But I dreamed of being like this guy. It took me a while to get my shit together and actually start working hard. Because I thought, like, for the longest time, it's just like luck. Like, that kid was really lucky. And it's like, sure, he was lucky. Luck is absolutely a factor, especially when you get up into like the really high numbers. But also he worked hard on it, and he learned how to computer program, and then he made a game. Neither of these things I did. Also, the book was fiction. So, you know, it's all made up anyway, isn't it?
So that was a fucking lie.
Most of them were rejected on the grounds that they were just total garbage. In some cases, cheap, crappy software labels decided to stick some of the NAF submissions on cheap, crappy software compilations containing as many as 50 crap games on one cassette. Surprise, surprise. But the programmers were paid next to nothing. One 14-year-old coder was paid just £10 by Cascade Games for his simple title Galaxy Defense, which then made an appearance on the notoriously bad 1983 Cassette 50 compilation, but he had to sign away all rights to the game. Okay, but you got paid £10 for a piece of shit you didn't do badly. In the case of Don't Buy This, Firebird claimed to be selling 5 of the most laughably bad games that were ever submitted to the software house, all of which were branded unoriginal and awful on the packaging. Firebird's marketing manager, James Levy, even joked to the computer press at the time, this compilation wasn't released, it just escaped. Corporate humor. It was never made entirely clear if the programmers of the subpar games were in on the joke, or perhaps more likely they'd been paid a few quid to get their submissions mercilessly mocked by Firebird. But look, I'm sorry, this is how capitalism works. If you sell the rights to something to a big corporation, they can do whatever the you want with it. That's their prerogative. I imagine you can ask your name to be removed from it and stuff, but really, I mean, you sold it, you got your money, deal with it. The inlay instructions invited customers to write in and complain about the dreadful quality of the games to be in a chance with winning a badge or a sticker. But most curiously of all, the instructions also revealed that Firebird had waived all copyright over the compilation out of sheer embarrassment and openly encouraged gamers to make pirate copies of the game so that your friends wouldn't need to waste any money on it. This is like OG viral marketing. Software houses at the time were fighting a losing battle over the serious issue of software piracy, as the cassette format made it easy for young school kids to duplicate and trade pirated copies on the playground. I don't even know, was it like cassettes? Is this like a musical cassette, you know, from back in the day? What are they called? You know, just like cassettes that you'd have an album or a single on, or you could record your own stuff onto. Is that the kind of thing? And then you'd copy it in a music tape machine? Something? I don't even know how this works. This is well before my time. I'm not that old. Everyone's always like, Simon, you're not 40. No, friends! I recently turned 34. I've lived a hard life. In fact, it evolved into a thriving little business venture for some of the playground's more entrepreneurial souls. I think I've mentioned this before, but someone who absolutely in no way was me didn't used to make, you know, a little bit of side money selling pirated games to his friends at school, because he happened to be one of the first kids who had a DVD and CD burner in his house at home and worked out how to, and obviously someone else, you know, worked out to bypass the copyright protection and then, you know, tie that in with a CD key generator or something. Definitely wasn't me. I'd never do that. Yeah, Yeah. But as the rest of the industry were fighting hard against piracy, it seems quite outrageous that Firebird were cheekily encouraging it. The 5 simple games themselves largely live up to the low expectations. Fido the dog is the shameful star of the compilation, as he appears in 2 depressingly similar mole-bashing games. Race Ace is a ridiculously frustrating top-down car racing game in which you can only turn your vehicle in a 90 and 180-degree turns. Brilliant. Well done. This makes it impossible to win, as the computer opponents always speed right past you whenever you try to make a turn. The compilation also includes a fruit machine simulator, a concept which was strangely popular on the 8-bit machines, despite the obvious flaw that you don't actually win any real money on the simulated slots. The instructions for this particularly slow and dreary effort artistically describe it as a mysterious, original new game which requires skill, timing, nerve, and absolute concentration. Yes, slot machines. All those people in Vegas, all those old grannies playing the slot machines over and over again, just throwing their money and lives away. So intense concentration on the slot machine. Probably the best of the bunch is Set Willy, which plays like a slightly enhanced version of Snake. Danny, I was really worried considering how much we've talked about rape and stuff. You'd be like, it's a rape game. Danny, no more rape games! Good lord! These are really big videos where I like to make money on, and there's no way this is monetized. Danny, why? We've talked about torture porn, we talked about rape, we talked about racism. The other things we need to hit are genocide. And now that I've said genocide, it's made this video so much. What am I doing? What am I doing? The biggest flaw of the game is that you have to mess around with redefining the keys every single turn, as the game doesn't remember your last choice. You'd think that a problem like this could have been solved in 2 minutes by a competent coder. Yeah, but these people aren't competent coders, are they? That's why they're making the worst ever games ever. But instead, the instructions reveal the ridiculousness as they proudly proclaim, playing this game is much easier than setting the keys. No one likes setting the keys, though. It's not a game. That's just labor. I was playing this game. I did not a live stream. It wasn't a live stream. It was just a recording of a game I played, because sometimes I play games called Papers, Please. And I'm like, oh my god, you just act as a border guard agent. And I'm like, you made bureaucracy interesting. Somehow you did it, developer. Bravo. And now I'm thinking about packing in all of this YouTube nonsense and becoming a border guard.
Your papers, please.
I'm getting quite a lot of coffee in my beard today. I'm glad I've got these beard-blazed shampoos and conditioners to take care of that nonsense. If you want to also take care of that nonsense, beardblaze.com is where you should go. Just thought I'd organically mention that here for no reason whatsoever, other than the fact that I make money when these get sold and stuff like that. Brilliant, isn't it? All 5 games are very poor, but a long way off from being the worst games ever released. In fact, we'll come to what is undoubtedly the worst game ever released later on in this video. Surprise, surprise! And no, it's not E.T. on the Atari 2600. The reviews by the press were relatively tame in their dismissal of the compilation, possibly because the reviewers found it difficult to criticize a game which openly admitted that it was meant to be rubbish. But what exactly was the reasoning behind Firebird's marketing madness? Maybe they really were working on the principle that advising potential customers not to buy something would have the opposite effect. Or maybe Firebird was just trying to whip up a bit of extra press attention by releasing a budget compilation with such an absurd title and premise. That's it. It's like early viral marketing. Back in those days, you had the full-price games priced around £10, which often featured licensed characters and were heavily advertised in the press. Holy games used to be £10. I guess it was the 1980s. But premium games on Steam, which I never buy, they're like 60 quid. It's like $100. It's like, now, it's really expensive. And you had budget games for around £2 or £3, which just kind of quietly appeared on the shelves with zero promotion and relied entirely on word of mouth. So this could have been Firebird's cunning strategy for creating a weird buzz around a budget title with no advertising budget. Many online sources claimed that the irony of the story is the fact that Don't Buy This ended up selling 250,000 copies and went on to become Firebird's biggest selling game ever. I think I'm going to release a special episode of Business Blaze called Don't Buy This, the episode of Business Blaze, and it'll just be like some script that Danny half-asses and I just half-ass, and then we'll sell it for £2.50, and we'll sell. No one's buying this because the strategy's already been done. But well, you never know. I'm not going to do that. That's just crazy talk. Or is it? My sweet capitalist heart is beating hard.
Hello, I like money.
Even the usually reliable Retro Gamer magazine gave the slightly less committed conclusion that the compilation sold extremely well. But I'm not buying that. Firebird never released the sales figure. Oh, okay, so The story is just like an internet rumor. See, that makes more sense. Firebird never released the sales figures, and the game failed to make an appearance in any Spectrum game sales charts at all, not even the special cheapo charts for budget titles. Considering some of the utter dross that did manage to at least creep into the back end of the charts at some point, it's safe to say that Don't Buy This didn't really shift many copies at all. And it's interesting to note that shortly after the game was first released, Firebird announced that they were already working on a sequel compilation called Don't Buy This Either, but it never materialized. Probably because the first one didn't do particularly well. Just guessing.
Explosion.
Because it was shit, purposeful shit, and they allowed people to pirate it. They were like, go nuts. And it's not really piracy because they gave you permission. King James Bible. As Father Mackenzie stands at the door of his church and shakes hands with the parishioners who exchange kind words on the morning's rocking sermon, his eyes fall with disappointment on the sight of the Buttertooth family. Danny, I love how you give all the characters weird names. What was the other one? Like Sharp something or other? Or, I don't know, there was someone Bottom. Danny, I love it all. Little Tommy Buttertooth had been staring into his newfangled Nintendo Game Boy for the entire sermon, and his parents had done nothing to dissuade this distracted behavior. Father Mackenzie suspects that young Tommy was probably playing Tetris, but at least he kept the volume down so that the whole church didn't have to put up with that annoying bloody tune. Yeah, if that tune was on, someone's going to be like, shut that the fuck. I'm trying to listen to the Jesus man talk. So little Tommy Buttertooth isn't going to find a place in heaven on the Tetris high scoreboard. So, as the Buttertooth family pass through the church door, Father Mackenzie bends down to acquire a word in Tommy's ear. Wait, is it Tommy or Timmy? Did I just read it as Timmy before?
Timmy! No, it wasn't you, Timmy. Try again.
He says, perhaps next Sunday you can leave the Game Boy at home, Tommy. No, dude, then I'd have to listen to you. I need something to distract myself from the boredom that is you. After all, this is House of God, not Pac-Man's Arcade Palace. I'd be like, listen, mate, it'd be better if it was the Arcade Palace, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Weirdo. Little Tommy is puzzled by the Pac-Man references. This is the 1990s, but he's not actively happy with the attitude of the dude with the dog collar either. He replies, actually, I was playing the King James Bible and learning all about Jesus. So what do you think of that then, Vicar? Was he really? Taken by surprise, Father Mackenzie grabs the Game Boy from Tommy's hands and exclaims, really? Let me have a go on that craziest shit. There are certain popular licensed characters from film or TV who have made something of a habit of popping up in a long line of video games over the last 40 years. At the time of writing, James Bond has appeared in 27 different games. I loved the James Bond PlayStation games when I was a kid. Those were the shizzle! And Batman has appeared in 42. And even Thomas the Tank Engine has appeared in 10 games to date, while so far, Roland Rat has only managed 1. But there's one hero that you don't see portrayed in video games very often, and that's our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Speak for yourself, Dano. Come to think of it, you don't often see the Prophet Muhammad in video games either. Dude, we know why that is. But let's stick with Jesus for now. Let's. When I first heard that Jesus made a rare video game appearance in a title called King James Bible, released by Wisdom Tree for Game Boy in 1994, I initially hoped that it might be a super tough arcade beat-em-up in which a gun-toting Jesus single-handedly takes on the Romans, occasionally replenishing his energy by either picking off 5 loaves and 2 fish or zapping water into wine. I would play the shit out of that game. Sadly, it's nothing of the sort. It's going to be one of those educational games. There's nothing worse than an educational game. Because you're taking something that's supposed to be fun, a game, and making it. It's kind of like edutainment on YouTube. You're taking something that's supposed to be fun, YouTube, and you're trying to educate people and teach them something through the platform. Who would do that? What sort of idiot would pursue a career in that drivel? The majority of the cartridge is taken up with a complete copy of the King James Version of the Bible presented in super searchable mode. Brilliant. You can either read the whole thing from beginning to end on your little Game Boy screen, which I'm pretty sure would send you blind, or you can just search for the juicy bits. For example, a search for locusts or apocalypse should instantly reveal a few more helpful pointers on the thorny topic of exactly how many Christians will have a reserved seat in heaven when the world ends. Isn't it like 160,000 or something? And it's like, shit, there's a lot more Christians than that. Uh-oh. Even the Bible says that most of you aren't going there. And they've got a special other place with like pitchforks and shit. I don't understand how like people can just ignore some parts of the Bible and then take as like God's truth the other parts. It's like, okay, Like, super religious people are not okay with homosexuality, but they're definitely okay with saying, yeah, we're going to heaven, even though there's only 160,000 places. It's like, what is up with that? It's weird. Stop it. I suspect that a lot of work went into this project, and it's strangely fascinating to see a 1990s version of the ebook, a whole 13 years before Amazon released the Kindle. But there's more to the King James Bible than just the King James Bible. You also get a chance to play 2 amazing games which really push the Nintendo Game Boy to its very limits. Well, I say that. One of them is called Bible Word Match. Which is basically just an electronic game of pairs in which you try to put together matching phrases from the Bible using nothing more than the gift of memory. I was hoping that the ultimate prize for getting them all correct might be an amazing cutscene from heaven in which God gives you a cheeky wink and a pat on the back for being so clever, but no, you just get a picture of a cherry. Brilliant.
Really, bitch? Thank you so much for wasting my motherfucking time.
Sounds a lot like gambling, doesn't it? Sounds like what a slot machine would show me. That sounds sinful. Hopefully not a cherry grown in the garden of knowledge. I seem to remember that God gets quite grumpy if you start nicking his fruits and vegetables. What a prick. The other game sounds a bit more interesting. It's called Bible Shepherd. So bad. I do remember those educational games from the 90s that plagued my childhood. I don't remember any specific ones, but I just remember them being, like, torturous. The other game sounds a bit more Oh, we did that already. But no, this is too. It's actually just a version of Hangman. I wondered if the game might depict Jesus getting drawn on the cross. At least this would have some relevance to the topic, but no, the graphics just depict a few sheep who jump out of your pen when you guess incorrectly, or jump back to safety into the pen whenever you get a letter right. Yeah, if we're doing Hangman, you could at least do a Jesus cross sort of crossover thing, couldn't you? Couldn't you? Make an effort, for sake.
You said it, man. Nobody fucks with the Jesus.
And for extra fun, all of the words relate to deeply obscure biblical tribes, so you're probably better off reading the Bible as a full bit of preliminary research before you really dive into the thrilling spectacle of Bible Shepherd. Maybe Wisdom Tree were trying to save the doomed youth from the satanic temptations of Tetris, Pokemon, Super Mario, and Zelda. They could possibly have been targeting that religious aunt looking for a nice Christmas present for a Game Boy addicted niece or nephew. Imagine the excitement as the kids realize from the shape that they'd be gifted a brand new Game Boy cartridge, and then they imagine the fallout when they rip open the package and discover this damn thing. Well, what I would do is I'd make sure I had one of those clear Game Boys, you know, the plastic was clear on the outside so you could see inside, and then I'd get a game I enjoy, and then I'd very carefully peel off the sticker, and very carefully peel off the Jesus bashing sticker, and I'd place the Jesus loving one on the one I actually enjoy, and I'd slot that bad boy in there and be like, yeah, look, I'm playing the Jesus game. Jesus game, yeah, no, it's the Bible Shepherds. Yeah, the brilliance. I love it. I'm getting so good at Bible stuff. Praise the Lord.
I knew you would come, but you've come.
I have come.
What?
It sounds as if Wisdom Tree didn't actually sell many copies at all. In fact, the scarcity of the game today has led to King James Bible becoming one of the most sought-after titles for the Game Boy completist, with the cartridge alone fetching $100, and full boxed package fetching nearly $750. What are we up to? But you have to admire the boundless optimism contained within the instruction manual, which begins, "Welcome to a powerful new world of excitement." Later on, the manual advises, "Keep a fresh set of batteries around. You'll be reading this Bible a lot. Dream on, mate." I doubt it, Vicar. I think I'll hang on for Mortal Kombat Bethlehem Brawl. That would be sweet. Penn and Teller's Smoke and Mirrors. Penn and Teller's a bit weird. I've definitely heard of them because they're like mega famous. But then I watched some show with them where they were trying to guess how people did magic tricks. And it was very strange. One, because I was entirely unfamiliar with them other than knowing their names. The one guy, the small guy, just doesn't talk at all. And I was like, why is the big guy always doing all the talking? And apparently it's a thing, which I was just completely unprepared for. I was like, that big guy's kind of hogging the spotlight all the time, isn't he? I think his name is Penn. And the small guy, Teller, is just kind of like silently there.
Now, before my partner Teller hits the shark-infested water, I'll need to borrow someone's crossbow.
And then in this show, it's like they try to guess how the magicians do it. And then they do. And they're like, yeah, we know how you do it. And the guy's like, yeah, cool. And they don't tell us because they don't want to spoil the guy's trick. So I'm like, what? What's the point of this show? And I was like, no, I've given up on this. I want to know how it's done. Spoil the illusion for me, Penn and Teller. If you can spoil anything when you can't speak.
What What's in the news today?
Will you shut up?
Hey, I thought you never talked.
Oh, God, now Penn's gonna beat me.
Folks, it's all part of the act.
No, it isn't.
Unlike other games in this video, Penn & Teller's Smoke and Mirrors was largely designed with a satirical eye, and it looked for a while as if it would never even see the light of day after it was shelved in 1995. But it certainly existed, and it was most definitely ridiculous, and quite intriguingly, one segment of the game went on to enjoy a new lease of life many years later and raise millions of dollars for charity along the way. So in that regard, it's perhaps one of the most successful and celebrated games of all time. To be honest though, the whole premise of the software package sounds a bit lame to me. Designed primarily for the Sega CD, with other versions planned for the IBM PC and 3DO interactive multiplayer, Smoke and Mirrors was a compilation of 6 original games, most of which were designed to fool or scam your friends in some way via the use of hidden menus and secret button combinations known only to the person who bought the instruction manual. That actually seems pretty clever. I like that idea. And it's like, why are you dominating me? And it's like, yeah, because you know the secret codes, but they don't. But then also you're going to be like, well, you're dominating me anyway because it's your game and you've had tons of practice on it. It's like your mate coming around to your house and you've been practicing Gran Turismo for weeks and he's never played and you dominate him. And it's like, what a surprise.
No. This isn't how you're supposed to play the game.
So for example, the package included fake psychic card tricks and a simple 2-player shooter, which always favors the player who knows how to cheat. My only problem with this idea is that most of your opponents are likely to already be clued up about the nature of the software, or will at least suspect something fishy when they spot that the title of the compilation is Penn & Teller's Smoke and Mirrors. Maybe you're just supposed to have fun while trying to fool your grandma. Yeah, except grandma's like, of course she's games. You could dominate her without cheating, because she's your grandma. Her arthritic fingers can barely grab the controller. But there was one game in the compilation in which it appears that the joke is on you, and that game is called Desert Bus. Ever since the 1970s, the racing game has been a staple of the arcade halls and home consoles, gradually evolving into the high-octane thrills and spills in which you're given an opportunity to handle a vehicle in ways you wouldn't normally be allowed to on the school run. So every racing game ever. Desert Bus took a slightly different approach. Oh, okay, we are talking about racing games in general. Simon, you big brain, try and follow what Danny has written. Jesus Christ. Desert Bus took a slightly different approach. In what Penn himself described as the best part of the collection, the object of the game is to drive your bus along the 3D landscape from Tucson. I know it's Tucson, but why are those letters the wrong way round, Tucson? Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada. Oh my god, and there's a whole thing about people from Nevada pronouncing it in their own stupid way. And I'm like, off, that's stupid. I'm never going to pronounce it that way. I'm going to pronounce it however I want, and if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. And stop being so butthurt about you just pronouncing it locally in your own special way. No one gives a shit. Off. The number of people who are like, it's Nevada, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't care. Christ, my Twitter was like alive with people from Nevada. It's like, oh, go away. Don't like you.
Daddy, chill.
Your city that you're most famous for is Las Vegas, and it's kind of just a tacky dump in the desert with no class. But while undertaking the 360-mile journey, you need to stick to the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit. And the game is played in real time, so the journey will take you 8 hours in total. Oh my god. There's no pause or save facility, so the only way of achieving your goal is to play the game in one continuous 8-hour session. Traditionally, the start button of the Sega Mega Drive controller is used to pause the game, but in this case, it just beeps the horn. This is clever. And didn't Gran Turismo have the endurance races? There was like an endurance race where you had to like go around the track for like so many hours. But what you could do is you could just use your like a book or something and get the controller and just press the forward button. And then because it's just a looping track, you could just ram the car into the edge, press the forward button, and the car just rams into the edge of the track, like the barrier, and just keeps going around the whole time. So that's how you could do the endurance race without actually having to endure anything. Which honestly, if I was doing that race in real life, I'd be like, cool, yeah, I'm just gonna drive my car into the side here and take a nap. Anyway, just that scraping massive, and I brought some earplugs. See you in a few hours.
No. This isn't how you're supposed to play the game.
There is absolutely no scenery to enjoy on the flat desert road. There's no other traffic, no turns to take, and no obstacles of any kind. The bus doesn't even contain any passengers. All you have to do is keep driving at the same slow speed on the endless stretch of road and try to stay awake. You can't even cheat by weighing down the accelerator button and leaving the game to play for itself, as the bus is constantly veering slightly to the right, so steering demands your full attention for the whole 8 hours. Holy shit. That is going to be painful. If you crash, a rescue truck will come along and tow you back to Tucson in real time before you can have another go. Just reset the console though. And if you somehow manage to complete this feat of endurance and make it all the way to Las Vegas, you're rewarded with a single point and given the opportunity to make the return journey. And yes, that's in real time too. Why? And I mean, I know there are those trucking simulator games that people are into. Is that in real time? I mean, because that's like, I mean, is it relaxing or something? Because wow, that sounds boring. At least then, I mean, at least I like taking a road trip. Like, I love like a good road trip, but you can stop, you can look out the window, you can like get some KFC at the rest stop, all of this stuff. It's lovely. But digitally, I'm not so sure. There are actually a few bugs in the game, but I don't mean errors in the code. Every 5 or so hours, a bug will splatter across your windscreen, providing a genuinely exciting milestone in this infinite journey to insanity. Now, there was a political point behind this madness. Penn had become increasingly concerned how video games were copying the blame for everything that was wrong in society, and how parents were shirking responsibility for the behavior of their children by pointing the finger at evil game designers who were corrupting their innocent offspring. Good for you, Penn, because yeah, this is just nonsense, isn't it? As I've said before, number of people I've killed in GTA, many. Number of people I've killed in real life, 0. Allegedly. No, I haven't killed anyone. That would be intense. He was also interested to see if Desert Bus might ultimately lead to any cases of copycat bus driving at sensible speeds. Sadly, it appeared he'd never find out. Shortly after reviews of the game had received a largely bewildered response from the press, the Sega CD was discontinued and the game's publisher, Absolute Entertainment, went bankrupt. Smoke and Mirrors would never make it to the shelves. But then about 10 years later, in 2005, one of those surviving copies was posted online before being discovered by Lost Levels, a website dedicated to the preservation of rare and deeply obscure video games. Nobody seemed particularly interested in the other games in the package, but Desert Bus suddenly started acquiring a new cult following. New conversions of the game were made for Android and iOS, and a new free VR version was released on Steam. There are even retro conversions produced for the Atari 2600 and Matt Allen Television. But even more significantly, in 2007, the sketch comedy troupe Loading Ready Run decided to raise money, whoopsie-daisy, for the Child's Play charity by posting videos of themselves enduring the original Desert Bus challenge. Under the banner of Desert Bus for Hope, the campaign has since become an annual event and has attracted the support of Penn and Teller themselves, who regularly send in pizza supplies to the dedicated gamers, along with sizable donations to the cause. Over the course of the last 14 years, Desert Bus for Hope has raised a staggering $7 million. Bloody hell, well done. And is now recognized as one of the world's longest-running internet-based fundraisers. Also, Desert Bus, if you've got multiple players, just get 8 people together and have everyone do it for an hour. That doesn't sound too bad at all. It's perhaps appropriate in a way that it took well over 10 years for Desert Bus to find a devoted audience, considering that this is about as long as it would take to rack up a half-decent score on the game itself. The worst game in the world. Finally, as promised. The history of video games is littered with hidden bugs and glitches, which clearly demonstrated that somebody had fallen asleep during the playtesting sessions.
It's a feature, not a bug.
I used to think being a video game tester must be awesome, but then I found out that you just end up playing the same tiny bit of the game over and over again, just in every possible way, trying to find problems. And I was like, well, that sounds incredibly boring, and apparently it's not very well paid. So that's that, yeah, hard pass. Even very modern games are often plagued with weird and wonderful bugs, some of which just result in bizarre graphical glitches, while others have the annoying tendency to freeze and crash the game without saving your progress. In most cases, the bugs are relatively harmless, if a tad frustrating at times. In more extreme cases, though, bugs can have a serious impact on the entire game. I've mentioned before that the 1984 Spectrum title, Set Willy, is for me quite possibly one of the best games ever written. You did, Danny? Because I don't remember that at all. I feel like I'd remember a name called Set Willy! Yet this beautifully twisted platform, in which you must explore Minor Willy's vast mansion and pick up the litter from last night's party, represented as small flashing items, as a fundamental flaw. Wait, so in this game, Set Willy, the guy's a miner, a miner, like coal miner or whatever, who lives in a giant mansion, and the game is clearing up after his party. What sort of game is this? This sounds boring. Several different bugs caused by the rush to get it to market faster than the author Matthew Smith would have liked make the game impossible to complete. For example, a few of the crucial flashing items are either rendered invisible or placed in positions that are impossible for minor Willy to access. In a way, it doesn't even matter. The game was so huge and so fiendishly difficult that nobody in their right minds would even consider completing the whole game. You just enjoyed exploring the strange mansion, and you got caught up in the thrill of discovering a new room or opening a whole new section of the house for the first time. The bugs were also very easily fixed. If you bought the computer magazines of the day, you would have been shown how to enter a couple of quick lines of code or pokes before loading the game to fix up the small errors. Ah, yes. Where you have to program the game yourself to fix the errors rather than just being like, yeah, download update. Download update!
And modern problems require modern solutions.
It seems a bit odd that one of the greatest gaming masterpieces of all time was impossible to complete in the state you bought it off the shelf, and yet it hasn't entered the legendary reputation of Jet Set Willy one bit. I'm unaware of this legendary reputation of Jet Set Willy. I think of like legendary games like Pac-Man, Prince of Persia. I super got into Prince of Persia. Like recently we had a sponsor. Oh god, whose name I can't remember. I'm so sorry. Pound Technology. And they sent me this thing, and they sent me a Sega Mega Drive or whatever it is. I don't even know, but it has Prince of Persia, and I'm like, that's legit. The same can't be said for another Spectrum game released in 1987, which must surely go down in history as one of the worst video games ever produced. Its name is Squidge. Pronounced Squidge. Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Squidge was first registered by the Powerhouse, the budget label of the London-based software company CRL, who weren't exactly known for producing high-quality titles. Yes, it's like buying Asda's value range. It's like you're already in Asda. Can it get any more value? The answer is yes. The game had originally appeared on the Commodore 64 a year earlier, and I was surprised to discover that the author was 12-year-old schoolboys, the guy from that book! Except this guy's name's Jason, and my guy was called Matt, who spent a year putting the game together and received the sum of £300 for his efforts. That's better than dollars. I mean, because there's more of them per value. But also, it's not a million. Like the guy in my book, he got like $1 million, and that was like in the 90s. It must be like at least 2 million today. Even though the original version of Squidge was widely dismissed by the press and ignored by the public, fair play to Jason Kendall for writing a commercial game at an age when most of us still thought we were clever by filling up the screen with rude words. The low sales and poor reception of Squidge made it an unlikely candidate to be ported across to other computers, but that's exactly what happened, with Squidge landing on the ZX Spectrum a whole year later. On first glance, the game looks quite intriguing for a £2 title. A fierce mutant bird appears on the front cover, which looks a bit like a cross between a vampire and a grumpy alien eagle. That is extremely specific. Sam! Getting a bit crazy from the blaze. It goes on, I get tired, my voice and legs are tired. I have taken a short break during this filming. You probably saw a coffee came and then went. But it's still a lot of standing up and a lot of blazing. If you'd like to see 24/7 Blaze, if it's still running, I put a stream together which just streams the archive 24/7 hours a day. 24/7 hours a day? That's not accurate. 24 hours, 7 days a week. Blazing it up, yes! The text on the back cover sounds comically dark and dramatic. Squidge was once a happy bird in the decadent days before the population holocaust. Then the flood ran out. You control this mutant creature who will stop at nothing to satisfy its only driving force: insatiable, ferocious, violent hunger. Blimey. Says it right there. But also, blimey. If you ignore all the mystical nonsense in the accompanying instructions, Squidge is actually just a relatively simple, multi-flick screen maze game in which you guide the bird creature through a cave, fending off nasties as you locate 6 pieces of a lost tree, which apparently grants everlasting life. That's what we all need, everlasting life, but it's not from some magical tree. It's going to be from science, and I can't wait. I bet Simon would have been first in the queue to slap his £2 on the counter if he'd been around at this time. You bet. Be like, everlasting life, £2? Boom. Take my money, sir. So after you've spent your £2 and 5 minutes loading up the game from the cassette, you're presented. Oh my god, and I think GTA 5 takes a long time to load. It's like, come on, please. Why? I just want to play.
But I want to play.
You're presented with a screen depicting a bird in the starting room of the cave. The bird doesn't look anything like the mutant creature on the cover. In fact, it looks more like a crudely drawn fat pigeon. Not only that, but it's massive, taking up most of the screen display. The game starts flickering a bit as you try to get to grips with the controls. The giant pigeon doesn't appear to be in any immediate danger from the nasties, as nothing seems to be happening yet. But the long-term problem is that nothing will happen. Not ever. Brilliant game, guys. So you made a fat pigeon, you put it on a screen, and you essentially said, done. Because Squidge is so badly broken that the controls don't even work, and it's impossible to make any kind of start on the game, or even make the fat pigeon move at all. Who allowed this to be released if it's so clearly broken? The root of the problem is a line of curious code slapped right at the beginning of the game, which decides only to recognize control inputs from the user in lowercase, and then cleverly activates the caps lock, rendering any input from the user invalid. Who programmed this? Why, you idiot. You are an idiot! Now, this might not be a total disaster in itself. Much like the set of Set Willy, this line of erroneous code is something that can be corrected with a quick poke, although the difference is that Set Willy was at least completely playable in its original state, whereas a copy of Squidge straight from the shelf was utterly useless. Oh my god, can you imagine? It's like you're waiting. GTA 5, if you don't know, is famously slow to load, and you're waiting there forever. But at least you don't have to do some programming. It's not like, I just got to jump into the code for GTA and make a few amendments before the game runs. No, that would be an enormous pain in the arse, and then you have to wait for it to... Maybe you could go in there and tell it to load faster. It'd be like speed up loading. Hack the mainframe. And there's another big difference. Even after fixing the first bug and gaining access of Squidge, you just run straight into the next massive glitch. It seems that you can either move the bird to the door on the left-hand side or to the door on the right-hand side. The bird moves at a ridiculously slow pace, but when you finally maneuver Squidge to the left door, nothing at all happens. And when you finally move into the right door, the game crashes.
Really, bitch? Thank you so much for wasting my motherfucking time.
There really is no hope of salvaging anything from this mess. Just go into the game and be like, speed him up. Like, adjust his speed from like 1 to 1,000. I used to love, I can't remember what it was called. It was a Star Trek game, maybe Star Trek Armada or something like that, where you'd have like this spaceship and you'd go off and you'd do all these space battles. But you could adjust the code of the game. You could just, and I don't know how to code but you could go into like these files in the game and just adjust how powerful the weapons were. So you'd be like, yeah. I'm going to take on 17 Borg cubes with a runabout. And you'd just be like, yeah. Phasers. What's the default power? 3? Those phasers now have power 3 million. And you'd just be like, and it would just absolutely destroy. Like, you're just single shot, game done. And it was cool.
What? You didn't even have oh my god!
So now, how on earth did CRL manage to release such an utterly worthless and broken piece of code onto the market without anybody noticing? Nobody bought it. I don't know. I really don't know. The job of creating the Spectrum conversion of Squidge has been given to a coder slightly older than Jason Kendall, 3 or years older, as Jason Crichton was 15 at the time. So aren't you going to get in trouble for like child labor or something? In an attempt to get a grip on the job at hand, Crichton naturally asked for a copy of the original Commodore 64 game, but nobody at CRL seemed very interested in giving him one. And when he turned up to the office at CRL to get his hands on the stuff he needed, the CRM managers got grumpy with him, trying to make out that it was his own fault that he didn't have the material that he should have been more organized. What are you talking about? Crichton naturally felt a bit aggrieved about all of this, and it didn't help matters when CRL eventually supplied him with a copy of the C64 game, and they supplied it on a disc, and Crichton didn't own a disk drive. Well, that's on Crichton, isn't it? No, it's not. He should be provided with proper equipment to be able to do his goddamn job. He's also 15. What are you up to? With the pressure of his exams looming, Crichton decided not to bother going ahead with the job for this bunch of clowns and told them to stick it. Then CRL started applying their own pressure on the teenage Crichton, insisting that he was now forced into completing the job as it's signed to Crichton. He's 15. What are you gonna do? Take it to court and be like, guys, the judge will be like, what the are you talking about? He's 15. He doesn't have legal majority or whatever you call it. Like, he can't sign that contract. He's 15! And you're gonna go to prison for child labor. Or, I mean, it's a company, it doesn't go to prison, but I don't know. What do they do to Nike, allegedly, when they find out they've been using child labor for like the 19th time? I guess they don't get in trouble at all because they've got lots of lawyers, and I'm sure it's some subsidiary company that allegedly has been doing this, and allegedly Nike isn't responsible at all, allegedly, according to me and my opinion, allegedly. Crichton took another look at the contract and noticed there was the clause which stated that the game could be rejected if it turned out to be crap. So in order to get CRL off his back and gain the freedom to turn his attention back to his exams, Crichton made a decision to create a rush job using shortcut cheats that would meet the minimum standards of functionality and the conditions of the contract, but would never be released by the publisher in a million years. Yeah. Speaking of like contracts and what you're contractually obliged to do, I had an advertiser who really didn't like a Business Blaze ad, and I was like, yo, okay, I'll do it your way, and they were like, really like, this is unacceptable, blah, 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 we don't like it, it's not professional, all of this stuff, and I'm like, bro, you should have watched the channel to see what you were getting into before you subscribed before you gave me a lot of money to do an ad. And they're like, so change it. And I'm like, well, I'm contractually obliged to. So I just sent them exactly what I'm contractually obliged to do, which is me standing here reading the copy word for word. And then they were like, we'll go with the original, thanks. And I'm like, you're goddamn right you will, and don't come back. And they weren't gonna come back anyway because I was a dick.
You've already told me off, let's move on.
You're tacky and I hate you.
But the nice thing about being me is that I'm just like, if I don't like the sponsor, I'm not gonna take it because I don't need your money. I already have enough money, thanks. And I love money, but not that much. He spent a total of 40 hours coding the game using a third-party software package called Laser Basic, which made coding easier and more accessible for the novice programmer. The only slight problem here is that he had to include the whole of the Laser Basic software package within the code for the game to work on the Spectrum. And as he was not licensed to do so, that means that every copy of the game was not only total garbage, it was also technically illegal. Double win. Here's where things get quite murky though. Even though Crichton knew he was delivering a pile of shit to CRL, which would never get released, he claims that he was at least submitting a functioning piece of shit which met the conditions of his contract. He also claims that he wasn't responsible for the opening line of code which activated the caps lock and disabled the controls, and he wrongly asserts that the original release of the game actually worked and that it was a problem with Squidge only surfaced in more recent years when people tried to play the game through modern emulators which were incompatible with the Laser Basic code. That's not true at all. Several hardcore Spectrum gamers with the original hardware have provided proof that the problems were always there with the original cassette. So we can only speculate about what went wrong. Some suggest that it was down to somebody at CRL's end who was making a misguided attempt to improve the game. Yes. What did you do? Well, we activated the caps lock when it starts. Brilliant work, John. I strongly suspect that Crichton had very little programming skills in the first place, hence his decision to use a cheat package to make it, and he perhaps didn't know how to fix the mess that he had created. He's 15. Who gives a shit? He's gonna be like, yeah, I'll do that. How much are you paying me? Holy shit, I'll figure it out. And then he couldn't. That's what happens when you hire a 15-year-old. What were you expecting? 25 years later, a little more poking around in the memory has revealed a bit more of the game beyond the first screen, and it's now possible for gamers to move Squidge around a few more screens at that agonizingly slow pace. But it still feels like you're playing a broken fragment of a game that was never finished. The real villains here are CRL, who unfathomably decided to release it to the public at £2 a pop. Wait, but it's also illegal because they were using all that Laser Basic code that they didn't have the rights to. That might not sound like much money at all, but it was pretty much half the weekly wages of a paperboy or girl. And it seems that this wasn't just a case of minimal playtesting, it's as if nobody at CRL ever bothered to load the game to check that it worked. Squidge managed to shift around 250 copies, possibly on the strength of the misleading screenshots on the back cover. Dodgy software houses often used images from the superior computer format alongside the vague disclaimer, screenshots may vary on your computer. Yeah, I mean, they still do this. I remember this in the past. Like you'd see an advert for a game, it would just say not actual gameplay. And it's like, you know what I'd like to see in an advert for a computer game? Actual gameplay.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
This always proved to be a crushing disappointment when you were enticed into buying a game by the colourful, swishy Amiga graphics depicted on the back cover, only to find out that your Spectrum version was a deeply disappointing monochromatic mess in comparison. In this case, 250 Spectrum users had been fooled into thinking that Squidge might be worth £2 based on the graphics which had been taken from the working C64 original. Still, maybe everyone involved learned a lesson from launching the worst game in history on the unsuspecting public. Why do I get the feeling that the next line is going to be, except no one learned a lesson? It's like the end of The Big Short. It's the greatest end to a movie ever. That movie about the 2008 financial crisis where they're like, which is like, okay, what are we making a movie about? Well, we're going to make a movie about the finance behind the 2008 financial crisis. So it's a document. No, it's a fiction movie with, wasn't Christian Bale in it? Am I imagining that? Yeah, he played Michael Burry chap. And people were like, fiction? Christian Bale? Really? But it's great. And at the end, they're like, you know, the disaster happens and then the narrator or whoever it is and then this happens and then this happens and everything was cleared up and new legislation was put into place, blah, 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 blah. Everything was better. And then he's like, whoosh, record scratch, except of course it wasn't. Oh, what a great movie. You should see that if you haven't seen it, although everyone's seen it because it's super famous. Don't be put off by the fact that it's about finance. It's actually extremely interesting. Not CRL though. Surprise, surprise. Later that same year, after Shirley being made aware that the bloody thing didn't work, they had the cheek to include Squidge on a £10 software compilation along with 7 other playable games. I really can't begin to comprehend how they got away with releasing the worst game in the world not once, but rather twice.
How dare you!
The Guy Game. You can't go wrong with an innocent quiz game designed to test the brain power and knowledge of healthy, competitive players. But somebody went very wrong with the Guy Game to the point where it briefly became the only video game to be illegal to sell or even own. Holy shit. In the United States. Wow. The Guy Game was launched in 2004 for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and Microsoft Windows. How bad can this possibly be when we had the rape game earlier that was fine? I mean, not fine, it's morally horrific. But it was allowed in everywhere except like Denver or something. It was the only game ever to be developed by Top Heavy Studios, and the name of the company might provide some insight into where we're heading with this one. Breasts. At the core of the game is a fairly average multiple-choice trivia quiz, the likes of which would have probably felt a bit out of date 20 years earlier. But there's a twist. The questions are interspersed with full-motion video footage shot during spring break festivities out at South Padre Island in Texas, in which your host, comedian Sadler, invites one of 60 bikini-clad young women to the stage to ask the same question that you were just asked. In a way, you're not really meant to give if you get the question right or wrong. What you now have to do is guess whether the excitable young female contestant knew the answer or not. Whenever a contestant guesses incorrectly, she is required to flash her boobs at the camera, although the first time round the breasts will be blurred out. Only by continually predicting correctly whether the contestants knew the answer or not will you keep raising the game's flasher meter until you reach a point where the footage becomes completely uncensored. Is that allowed? I mean, I guess if you make it like 18 plus or whatever. So far, so trashy. Well said, Danny. Some might put forward the very reasonable argument that this is all just a bit of harmless fun involving consenting adults, and anyone who has a problem with it has the option of not buying the game and minding their own business. Yeah, I mean, except did those people, I guess those people, the women flashing their breasts, were forced to sign not forced, but asked to sign a release? Because otherwise you definitely can't do that, you gotta get a release. Others have suggested that there's something quite troubling about players being rewarded with boobs after guessing exactly how dumb each spring breaker really is. Yeah, I mean, that's just the trashy part, though. And whether or not the contestant will know how many letters there are in the alphabet. 27, Danny. Sadly, when that exact question is asked, the contestant gets it wrong, but she makes up for the disappointment by flashing her testicles at the gamer. However, really? Letters I know it's 26. But is that really something people get wrong? Jesus Christ, now I'm doubting whether it's 26 because I'm like, it is 26, right? I don't want to sound super dumb. However, regardless of your stance on the Guy Game, the very visible point of all of this is that Top Heavy Studios got a lot more than they ever got hands on when they found themselves facing a lawsuit. The studio had always claimed that unlike the women involved, they had all their bases covered with the production of the spring break footage. Each participant had been required to show ID to confirm, someone's got a fake ID and you put someone underage flashing their boobs in your game. And sign a modeling release, before being paid the princely sum of $20 for their contribution on stage. If that's the case, then it's like, okay, you took your $20, you signed your release. Okay, you know what you're getting into. But somebody somewhere must have been caught napping on the beach. One teenager, whose identity was never disclosed, filed a lawsuit against Top Heavy Studios, Sony and Microsoft, which claimed that she had never been made aware that her topless footage would be made public. You gotta get a release. And by the way, she had been under the age of 18 when she took part in the saucy fun and frolics. You can't use underage people. Obviously. It's possible that Top Heavy Studios weren't particularly bothered by the first claim of privacy violation, bearing in mind that getting paid for flashing your breasts under contract in front of hundreds of people and a huge camera crew possibly diminishes any reasonable expectation of privacy. It's maybe more likely that the teenager wasn't specifically made aware that the footage would appear in a video game, and the circumstances under which the teenager discovered the video game are more than a little icky. Her own younger brother and his friends had apparently been enjoying the Guy game. Oh no! On Xbox, and they'd all been taken by surprise at the sight of his sister flashing her boobs at them. Oh my god, can you imagine being a kid? You would never live that down. Oh, good lord. But the second claim was impossible to deny, as the teenager was easily able to prove to the courts exactly how old she'd been when the filming took place, and this magic number was a whole 3 months before she hit 18, meaning that top-heavy studios were effectively selling child pornography. Microsoft and Sony were rightfully let off the hook, as the development of the game had nothing whatsoever to do with them. Yeah, it sounds like she just threw them in the lawsuit because deep pockets, baby. But a judge in Travis County, Texas, granted an incredibly unusual temporary injunction, which made the sale and ownership of the game illegal overnight. Well, wouldn't it be illegal anyway, because now it contains child pornography? By its very nature, it is illegal. No? Top Heavy initially laughed off the injunction, posting a defiant message on their website which read, "The man has decided that our fun and hilarious presentation of Spring Break revelry just wasn't appropriate for the world of gaming. If you're lucky enough to own it, hide it under your mattress." That is not an appropriate response to a legal decision, to be honest, and yeah, I get the feeling this isn't going to end well for you. But within a year, the company had completely disappeared, and the Guy game ultimately bounced into oblivion as gamers were forced to put both hands back on the controllers where they belonged. It's not exactly clear what happened with the lawsuit, as it appears to have just fizzled out. An edited version of the game with the offending footage removed was briefly made available, but it would still be technically illegal to own the original version, although I doubt it would lead to a prosecution. Still, probably best to play it safe and just stick to Samantha Fox's strip poker in the future. It might be a crime against gaming, but at least you're not going to end up spending the next 10 years playing dominoes for cigarettes with Monty Mole and Johnny Sausage. Holy hell, that was a long blaze. That was an epic blaze. Thank you everybody for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please do go over and check out our fantastic new products on beardblaze.com. We got the Beard Blaze shampoo, we got the Beard Blaze conditioner. Pairs beautifully with of course the beard oils that we've had for a while up there. So thank you everybody for watching, beardblaze.com, and I will see you next time.
No. This isn't how you're supposed to play the game.